It's easy enough to explain from a safety standpoint. You get infection prevention involved, they'll be right there with you saying, no, this is not acceptable. And that's one of the things that I always try to do when you ask what resources do you use to explain this. Get infection prevention involved. They will look at that and tell you right then and there, because most of the infection prevention people are, it's right in their title, right? Preventionist. So they want to prevent anyone from getting injured in these kinds of ways also.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
All right, Clean Freaks, welcome back to another episode of the Beyond Clean podcast. This is season 32, SPD Fact Check. I'm your host, Bobby Parker, and joining me in studio again for as co-star for the season is Jamie Amaya. Jamie, welcome back to the studio.
Hey, good morning. Don't mind my voice. I'm not sick. I just talk too much. So this is how I'm repaid.
That's your payment for all the yapping. I'm sure it's been all good things though. So.
It's definitely all great things.
It's great. Well, we'll try to give you a little bit of a break today then in studio. It's going to be a good episode, Jamie. We've got a topic in front of us around instrument transport that is frankly too big for one episode, but we're going to narrow in on some knowledge gaps around instrument transport, particularly, how do you get things from a clinic or from a small, ASC OR to SPD, and people get real inventive when it comes to instrument transport. I've seen everything from a pillowcase to like a Tupperware container. Like there's all kinds of ideas out there.
Shower curtains.
Yep. So we're gonna dive into some of that, and joining us as guest for the season, we brought in an SPD expert who's been in consulting for a long time, and to be frank, also is known to be a bit of a talker. So I don't think we're gonna struggle too much for volume of words today. So we should be good to go on that front. Well, we will head off to break. So we'll be right back with Marc Finch after a short break.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
And joining us now in studio is Marc Finch, Senior Perioperative Consultant for Sullivan Healthcare Consulting. Marc, welcome to the studio. Glad to have you on the show.
Hi, glad to be here.
I don't know why we haven't gotten you on a little bit sooner. For those curious, Marc and I have been working in sterile processing together for quite some time. It was actually a former boss. So, Marc, no embarrassing stories about me on the air today, please. Right? But yeah, why don't you?
Can I bribe you? That's the key.
Yeah, no, because I'm in control of the editing. We'll just snip it right out.
There you go.
Right out. No. So Marc, why don't you take a couple of minutes here at the top of the show to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do and what you've been doing lately in the industry.
All right, sounds great. So way back when in the early 80s, I joined the military because I thought I wanted to be a surgeon. Couldn't afford medical school, so I went into the Army to be a surge tech / SPD tech. That's the way the military trains. That was back in 83, to be honest with you. So I've been doing this for 40 some years. Started out working in both as a surgical tech and as an SPD tech. That's the way the military did it. 1 week you were upstairs, next week you were in the basement, until you kind of went into this situation of being kind of requested to do as scrubs. Did that for 7 years, got out of the military, went to the civilian world, stayed in as an ST for a while because, of course, it paid a little bit better. Was fortunate enough that I had some people that wanted to mentor me to be a leader. So I took a position as management within SPD and did that throughout the year. So I've held just about every kind of position from staff member to lead supervisor, manager, all the way up to the director of sterile processing in an academic center. Did some teaching as an adjunct professor. So did that for about 30 years. And then about 10 years ago, decided to go into consulting, hopefully to be able to give some back. Did do a stable job for a little while at Jewish Hospital, that's where Bobby and I work together here in Louisville, but have been consulting ever since, taking interim positions and also helping the perioperative space become considerably more efficient, really live up to the standards and things of that nature. So that's what I've been doing for the past few years.
Yeah, well, Marc, we invite all kinds of different types of guests on the show to hear their perspective, get to know what we can learn from them, from scientists to first-time technicians to multi-decade consultants in the field like yourself. And it's not the topic of the conversation today, but do you want to just say a word real briefly about career growth in sterile processing? I imagine that you probably didn't figure from the beginning that you'd be doing this, 30, 40 years later, doing healthcare consulting. So
right.
Any words for those who are just getting started about career growth and how to make a thriving career out of it?
Sure. You're exactly right. I really thought that this was going to be my stepping stone. I thought, of course, as a surgeon, I realized I didn't want to be a surgeon pretty quick just because of the lifestyle and things of that nature, and that they were, basically never home. And I thought I wanted to have a family and all of that, which obviously I do. But so along the way, I started taking some classes that allowed me to advance throughout, but also just having mentors around you that really wanted to make sure that you were successful in whatever portion that you were doing. So sterile processing and the perioperative space in general has tons of ways that you can advance. I was fortunate enough, again, to have, like I said, good mentors that put me into leadership positions. They saw something in me that I probably didn't see in myself at the time. And then as I just went through my career and, wanting to do more and learn more and continue to thrive in what I was doing, gave me the opportunity to do all those different steps in the career ladder within the sterile processing. So, there's so many different things and so many different ways you can go. And then because of all the experience that I wanted to give back, I love teaching. And so, giving back to me, I had the opportunity to be a consultant. They contacted me. And so I took a leap of faith and did it and loved it. And to be able to go into different facilities and say, this is a really good way to do things. So it's been very enjoyable. And, again, you're not going to get rich in this industry per se, but you know what? It's very satisfying. And I feel really blessed that I've been able to do what I do.
I'll echo what you said about the importance of mentorship, even if it's not in the facility that you're at. Get connected with somebody in the industry like a Marc Finch, and get some advice about how you should be growing your career and what you need to be working on next on your journey. Well, Marc, that closing statement about loving to teach and give back is a great segue into what we're talking about today. The season that we're working through is all about knowledge gaps in sterile processing, kind of some of the myths and misconceptions. And the topic for today's episode is on instrument transport. And so we wanted to speak to somebody like yourself who's seen a lot of good transport processes and maybe some that aren't so compliant. So let's start right there, Marc. Whenever you go into a brand new facility doing an assessment and you observe their contaminated instrument transport process for the first time, what's the most common mistake or mistakes that you find around this instrument transport topic?
Well, obviously, it kind of depends on the facility that you're going into. But a lot of times in like some of the smaller facilities, what I find is they really just think it's okay to keep the instruments on the back table, not even necessarily covering them, and then just running them into the elevator and down to the SPD, or in some cases where the SPD is on the same floor, you just take them right into the room and do it that way, right to decontam. I mean, some of them will fold the back table cover over them and things of that nature, but I find that's probably the one that's the biggest infraction, because I've seen it happen where they, in a sense, catch a bump in the road or whatever, and the table turns just enough that instruments fall over the place. And of course, they're not completely clean, because I don't know if people know this, but point of use cleaning is not as popular as it should be. So you see bloody instruments and all of that nature out there.
Yeah. So I've seen a bit of that as well. So let's start with that one, because there's quite a few that I want to get to, but that is one of the big ones. So this facility that I was at had, I think 3 or 4 ORs, and sterile processing was just across kind of the back hallway to these ORs. So they literally were moving these instruments about 15 steps from the door of the OR into the door of SPD, and we're doing so on a back table, and were frustrated that a surveyor had just informed them that that's not an appropriate practice. Can you tell us a little bit more, like, why is it not appropriate to use a back table to transport, even if it's just 15 steps within a controlled hallway from the OR to SPD?
Well, when you're doing that, you're still exposing so many other people to, the different bacteria and such that occurs. I mean, if you really think about it, when you're fortunate enough that it was a controlled hallway, right? I've seen it where it's not a controlled hallway, where it is actually visitors and such could feasibly go through that area, because either you're down in the basement or whatever the case may be, or upstairs, you're still exposing people to biohazard that they really shouldn't be exposed to. Point of use cleaning doesn't occur as much as it really truly should. You're taking those bloody contaminants. And if you look at all the different types of studies of spray and things of that nature, because some people still have that basin full of saline or hopefully sterile water on their back table. And so that can spill. All of those kinds of things, could be affecting other people.
And excuse my voice, but
okay.
Hey, when we got to be at work, we got to be at work.
That's right.
But what do you offer for support for facilities like that? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I have a facility like that. Same 4 OR rooms. It's literally a hop, skip, and a jump to my back decon door, right? And you have to come up with a scenario. Too small for a case cart, right? Or any type of enclosed cart, because they're big. And then safety, right? We're in the OR, so it's all cord. So there's no patient care affected, but we got to get them there. So then what do you then, as a consultant, how do you then train or come up with an idea or plan to fix that type of scenario? So Mark, you're talking about making sure that we have proper transportation, as Bobby said, from 15 steps away. What can you tell the people listening what best practice is? Because I have a facility where we had to figure that piece out, right? Because it's too small. You don't have case carts. You try to find an enclosed cart, but you're in a core, right? So you're trying to make sure that you're doing it properly. There's no patients involved. But how do you consult and kind of help fix that type of scenario when you're out of options?
Yeah. So, the great thing about our facilities, we have a ST79 that really gives us a guideline. And in section 6, which is handling, collecting, transport of contaminated items, it really outlines really what you're supposed to be doing. They're pretty clear about why, because they always, as you know, give a rationale at the end of each statement of what you're doing. So to show that we're actually exposing, okay, we're not exposing public, but you're exposing your coworkers, which are just as important as any visitor, correct? Because of the effects that it can have. We work in a sense, a dangerous area per se when it comes to dirty instruments and the biohazards that we are actually exposed to. So giving them that support, showing there is a better way. And then when they do have that Joint Commission come through and do the survey, or DMV, whichever you use, you can be able to point to that so that they know that the next time they're coming through, you'll have it addressed.
So I do sit on some of the voting, boards for AAMI. Mm-hmm. And I do know that this is a topic that's come up where they're potentially looking at making some changes within the guidelines on transportation. So what do you think is going to change in the fact of what's going to be required? Why? I mean, we kind of touched on that a little bit, mm-hmm. but what is it truly saying about transportation of contaminated instruments in all aspects? Walking down a hallway from another floor back down to an SPD. Where do you think, what's the why behind all of it?
Well, so again, because I've been in the industry so long, so what I've seen, just to give a little bit of a background, where we do completely open case carts that actually go down elevators that they just throw a bag over, that was considered covered. But again, back in the day, we did transport all liquids because you poured them all into a hopper. We realized that that's not the appropriate way, that it really needs to go through the suction and really be cleaned out in the room. So that's a change already there, because they realized, again, who's going to be exposed and what you're going to be exposed to, especially, with the rise of different types of bacterial infections and viruses that are out there that we all can be exposed to through these biohazards. We really need to be able to contain them in a way. So that's why the changes are going to be, because this was accepted at one time. This was an accepted behavior. Now we're realizing, and you can see even the changes of the locked containers, at least from like the clinics, right? You already are addressing it from the clinics, and then anything that we transport outside the hospital and what the DOT says and all those kinds of things. Another, completely, larger topic is that, transportation of contaminated outside the hospital. But I think it's what TIR 109 is addressing that. Yeah. And eventually I'm sure that'll become a standard. So, but that's not what we're here for on that one. So I think going to, the fact that they're trying to design case carts a little bit smaller so that they could be in the smaller facility is one way to do it. I think you see the big red bins occasionally, but so that becomes a way. But these bins that are labeled biohazard and such need to be locked. I think that's going to be something you're going to see, because in the facility I'm currently in, they don't lock it. And they don't really fit on the cart, especially if they have to put two of them because it's a larger case. So then it's tilted, and then it has ability to, again, possibly fall over and expose people or even injure people with all the trays. And not to mention, okay, if say you don't injure people or you don't get exposed, you are also now damaging instruments. We don't want to damage instruments. A good quality instrument. Yeah, well, they cost too much, but a true good quality instrument that you truly take good care of, they can last 50 years if it's taken care of, with all the proper PMs and things of that nature. But again, that's another topic. So why expose that to all of this by transporting them wrong?
Yeah. So, Marc, I want to talk more about what you've been doing with the red bin process at either at your current facility or another. But before we do, since we have some folks listening in who probably haven't read AAMI ST79 Section 6, can you give us just a quick punch list of what exactly is required for soiled transport today? If you wanted to get an instrument, whether from the OR to SPD or from the emergency department 2 floors away to SPD, like what is required to compliantly transport a device through the facility?
Yeah. So what they say is, from point of use, they want the instruments completely contained, and they can be reusable collection containers or And it says that they should be in a locked container now. Sharps and stuff obviously should be taken away. How you segregate the instruments are going to be a little bit different in each of the facilities. I personally believe all instruments need to be cleaned the same, whether they've been used or not. So, and AAMI, wants you to clean all the instruments the same way. So they need to be, how would you put it? They just needs to be identified that where they go into a rigid type container as opposed to exposed as they go through. And again, that could be anything from these red bins, case carts, and things of that nature. So they want you to be in a locked container that doesn't allow contaminated or bloody material to be a source of infection for others.
Right. And so transporting from the clinic then, like I've seen folks use a biohazard baggie before as a way to transport, something that could puncture that baggie, like a scissor or a hemostat or something. And it's enclosed. It's not getting on the environment. It's labeled biohazard, which is one of the requirements, but still doesn't pass the test because it's not in a rigid puncture resistant container, right? Yeah. And so that's the struggle that we're dealing with this back table problem. It's like we've got all of it contained. I've even seen products from a long time ago designed specifically for this purpose, like a big shower cap to put over the back table, right? To try to
they still make those. They still make those
to try to contain it. And so it sounds like, Mark, you're saying that that's not in the spirit of what the standards are requiring of us, that it needs to be something that's closable with a lid, that's rigid, that's puncture resistant, and maybe even the next step, which would be that it's locked so it's not going to spill across the floor.
Correct. Because again, that was very acceptable back in the day, because I don't think they realized how people can be affected by what's inside there. Those biohazards now, we're realizing, of course, AIDS came along back in the 80s, and we realized that was going to be effective. Now we're looking at the hepatitis. We're looking at, so many different things now that you can be exposed to that is going to affect you for the rest of your life if any of these actually happen to you. So by doing this, it's another way to protect you, right? And the bag, the big gigantic shower cap, any of those really don't protect you in any way. That's why going through that puncture-proof rigid container is really what our standards are and our industry is really looking for. And it's easy enough to explain from a safety standpoint. You get infection prevention involved, they'll be right there with you saying, no, this is not acceptable. And that's one of the things that I always try to do when you ask what resources do you use to explain this. Get infection prevention involved. They will look at that and tell you right then and there, because most of the infection prevention people are, it's right in their title, right? Preventionist. So they want to prevent anyone from getting injured in these kinds of ways also.
So talking about these red bins, again, sorry about my voice.
That's okay.
I talk too much. Just kidding.
Right.
But when you have, there's so many questions I have now, but so you're looking at it from, okay, let's get these red bins. They all lock now, right? And now we're getting them into SPD, and now you got to clean them, right? So am I manually cleaning these red bins, and is my staff really not going to like me anymore because I'm putting some manual labor into it? My back hurts. Now I got to lift them because they're heavy. How do you sell someone on that? Because we get it. Safety first. I totally understand. But they're not going to look at safety first. They're going to say, what about me? Like, now I have to manually do all this, or is it going through a washer? Like, what's the process, and how do you really get the staff's buy-in to everything?
Sure. In the smaller facilities, you probably do not have a cart washer, because if you did, then you'd be using case carts. So yeah, unfortunately, it is a manual cleaning that you do. But again, I think the way I preach it is that it is about safety first. Do you truly want to be exposed to this? and again, not that it happens often, I hope, but think about if a sharps is left in there or anything of that nature, and it was just in that simple bag and you go to grab, it's a safety issue right there. The cleaning out is really not as difficult as you think, depending on the size of your bins. But if you have appropriate size bins, it's a pretty easy clean out with the appropriate wipes. And you also could feasibly do an initial rinse in the sink if necessary, and then come back with the appropriate wipes depending on which I have, because most of the bins will tell you what to clean with so some of them is a 5% bleach solution, even though I know we prefer not to have bleach in our department, but sometimes a simple 5% or the purple top or the gray top wipes that we have in the hospitals are simple and you can get those in the larger sizes if your hospital looks at that. So that's part of it. The other concern, though, is the cart that you bring them on, because most of the time the instruments are too heavy to actually be carried, and I wouldn't recommend that anyways. So you also have to do the same thing to the carts. You have to clean the carts in the same way because, again, you don't know as you are putting the instruments into the red bin what dripped off or whatever and went onto the cart. And so you have to clean those too. So it's actually 2 items that you're cleaning, or, again, on the larger cases, you may have 1 or 2 of the red bins, or even up to 3 red bins on your big orthopedic or spine cases. So that's where it goes into. But I think it's just the education of the safety that it really comes down to is, look, this is important. It is part of our job. We clean so many other things. Cleaning out a red bin and a cart is really not that much more to it.
Right.
Yeah. And I appreciate you giving us that mental picture of what it looks like, because I'm sure somebody's listening in thinking, that the back table process across the hallway is exactly what we're doing today. So as they're thinking about how to transition to a more compliant workflow, like what is the purchase list for them of what they need to be looking at so that they get the right thing and don't end up going down a process that's more difficult than it needs to be? And what does that training process rollout look like?
Yeah. So what I've done in the past is I've tried to look at the different, what is our case mix, right? Are we mainly spine and orthopedics? Are we mainly general? Do we do a lot of eye cases? What are those kinds of things? And then you look at your size of instrumentation that's going to be coming back from the OR to your decontamination area, right? So really try and look at that aspect to see what size bins you use, because you also don't want to just put a little itty bitty eye tray in one of the real big red bins, because it's going to bounce around and such, and you don't need that. It's going to damage those eye instruments, right? So it's a matter of really truly looking, and there's multiple companies within our industry that sell these types of bins. And so whatever is in your particular GPO that you use, who you purchase from, whether it's Medline, HealthMark, eSurgical, whoever it is, to get them. Yeah, right. So wherever you get your equipment from, that's what you do, and you can have that, from there. And then if you actually can size it for the actual case that you're doing, then also you need a good transport cart to put those red bins in to bring back to decontam. And again, those can be also different sizes if you chose them to be. Most facilities buy one size and put them in, but it becomes a storage. But again, those need to be wiped down, and then probably because of your size and ability to keep those, you may need to take them right back to outside the room for the next surgery that's completed. So that all goes to adjust and look at the volume of cases you're doing a day. If you're doing 15 cases a day, you may need 5 or 6 carts to transport, and then depending on your different trays. What you don't want to do, and which I've seen in some places, is put multiple trays in one red bin stacking, because again, there's your damaging instruments. So it's much better to be able to separate and use multiple bins to put them in.
Yeah, and then if that bin has to get lifted, it doesn't weigh 100 pounds because it's got a couple of trays in it, right?
Right. Yeah.
The solution that everybody thinks is the obvious solution is just to go to a closed case cart, because then you don't have to worry about bins, because the whole case cart is the bin. Like, you close the door, you slide the slider over that biohazardous, and you roll it down to SPD. That's the dream, right?
Right.
Are there any circumstances where maybe you would recommend the bins over getting a closed case cart in some of these smaller facilities? Or is it one of those things where if you've got the budget and you're willing to manually clean the cart, that the cart is the better way to go?
Well, I don't know how many of you have had to manually clean a case cart before.
It's fun.
It's not exciting at all. So sometimes, from that standpoint, sometimes the red bin is a better choice, because that is backbreaking to clean a cart sometime, about having to get down, get in there, because the crevices and such that happen in a case cart are considerably more. And all it takes is one of the seals, whether the case cart was used by a silicone seal on that brace that's up there, to get under there, and the things that can, believe it or not, aerosol into those things. It's very difficult to clean that case cart, right? So sometimes I would recommend the red bin over the case cart. Case carts are great if you have a cart washer, obviously, because then that really truly does that. As you mentioned, some of these smaller facilities just don't have the room to put a cart washer in, because that would make our life easier on all of this. But so sometimes the smaller case carts work well. If it's a small facility, you have the place and you have the, understanding of what it really truly takes to clean out a case cart, because it's not like you just spray in there and then just wipe it down. You've really got to be able to look in there and see what's cleaned for inspection.
Yeah, we talked earlier in the season with Angus Bruce about case cart washers, and he was telling us about the pit at his facility, that back in the day, with just like rolling it out there with a pressure washer gun, just like blasting the thing, And so, in some respects, that would be better than trying to clean the upper back corner underneath the shelf with the purple top wipe. Would be that'd be a challenge. So
I remember a facility in Upper New York. Maybe I wonder if he and I were at the same facility at one point. I know he's from the New York area. I know he's at where he's at now, because he replaced me as a consultant there. So
yeah, I
know exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah, we've all had to do it when the cart washer goes down. It would be a tough pill to swallow. Well, Marc, we've already run out of time, and I've got more transport questions for you, and I'm sure other folks do too. So if people wanted to get connected with you, is LinkedIn the best way to do that?
Yep, that's it. Yep, I try and look at that as often as possible. I can't say I look at it every day, but yeah, definitely reach out through LinkedIn. That's a great way to do it. So yeah, feel free.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us on the show today, and great job on the interview. I think we all took something away from this one. I appreciate it.
Well, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, my pleasure.
And that was Marc Finch, Senior Perioperative Consultant for Sullivan Healthcare Consulting, walking us through best practices for transport. And Jamie, it feels a little bit like we just beat up on folks for a half hour about like what you can't do, what transport must not be. But I did appreciate from Marc's perspective that it really is driven by patient safety, and that in some cases it feels a little silly or pedantic to have to use these bins and create this whole wipe down process. But it really is best practice. And when you look at the standards, your surveyors are going to expect you to follow those standards for, transport in a rigid bin. So I think it was worth uncovering today.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing that I was thought processes were, what if I work in a different department and I want to come down to SPD? Why can't I use my sterilization container? It's rigid, has a lid, has locks.
Right.
Why can't I use that? And I get that question all the time. Well, what's the problem? You said it has to have a lid, it has to lock, it's got to be rigid, and then it's going into that. Well, you got to understand a sterilization container versus a biohazard container. Can you walk down a hallway with a sterilization container? And I see it. I see it all the time.
Yeah, just putting the dirty instruments back in the rigid sterilization container that they came in. I've seen that as well. Of course, the things that come to mind are the perforations in those, because steam's got to get into them.
Right.
And so what about what about a rigid container that doesn't have perforations? Like they make some sterilization containers out there that are filterless, like they have a mechanical filter in them without perforations. What would you say on that one?
Yikes. No, look at it. You got Joint Commission, you have DMV, they're walking through. You have to identify that you have biohazard materials with you at all times. So you just can't do it. And I think a lot of people are still probably right now scratching their heads like, what do you mean I can't do that? So it's got to be identifiable. You got to tell what you're walking down the hallway with. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I ask that because I've seen a rigid container system before that had no perforations on the bottom. They had the sterilization lid, had the perforations on the top for steam to get in, but then they also sold a separate lid that was just rigid with no perforations on it that was red that said biohazard on it, with the intention that you would, like, whenever it was time for dirty transport, you would snap that lid on it and it would kind of transform into a rigid biohazard transport. I think that's curious and interesting. I'm not sure what the use of that would be. Like, I guess if you kept the other sterilization lid clean to where it didn't, like, outside the room and could be wiped down, it could maybe be transported some other way as you carry that one. It seems like kind of a wild workaround, but yeah, that's a really good point. Like just a general rigid sterilization container, generally not going to fly because it's not labeled as biohazardous and it's not leak proof. If you get some wet soil in there that saturates that filter, you might be, dripping on your way down the hallway, and that's that's no good. That's no good. Good call out there.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for today's episode, is working through transport. We've got plenty other knowledge gaps in SPD to be working through. So until we talk to you guys again next week, on behalf of Jamie, myself, and the whole team over at Beyond Clean, keep fighting dirty. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.